Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of React Native Radio. This week, I'm talking to Farhan Thawar. So Farhan, please let everyone know who you are and kind of what you're all about.
Cool. That's a daunting thing to do, but I'll give you the short version. So currently at Shopify, I'm a VP engineering, and I look over a bunch of different things, including retail, multi-channel, which is our marketing and marketplaces stuff, and mobile, which is why we're here today to talk about React Native and our decision to build all new apps using React Native at Shopify.
Awesome. And joining us today, we have James. James, if you want to remind viewers who you are.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a software engineer from the UK.
Cool. And we also have Ricky with us.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And I'm Tim. So welcome back, everyone.
Early in my career, I figured out which jobs were worth working at and which ones weren't, mostly by trial and error. I created a system that I used to find jobs and later contracts as a freelancer. If you're looking for a job or trying to figure out where you should go next, then check out my book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. The book walks you through figuring out what you want, vetting companies that meet your criteria, meeting that company's employees, and getting them to recommend you for a job. Don't settle for whoever has listed their job on the job board. Go out and proactively find the job you'll love. Buy the book at devchat.tv/jobbook. That's devchat.tv/jobbook.
So let's dig in. Can you tell us a little bit, just a very high level overview, kind of what's going on with Shopify, and now there's this sudden interest in React Native going on.
Yeah, so I don't know how sudden it is. We've been looking, so maybe my history is I've only been at Shopify for about a year. Came in through acquisition of my last company. But Shopify has been looking at and thinking about React Native for a long time. So one thing to note is on the web, Shopify uses React heavily. And there's a lot of investment we've done to not only like bring on the best and brightest in React, but also to train people on React. Like I think in many ways, we look for really, really sharp people with interesting, diverse backgrounds. And if they know our technology stack or not, that's not a major contributing factor to whether they come on board at Shopify. And so we've trained lots of people in React in addition to bringing lots of folks on. And in 2015, when React Native was first announced and first launched, we took a hard look at it. And teams were deployed to build things in React Native. They wanted to see what it was all about. Some of it due to the fact that you get maybe for free cross-platform on mobile, but there was a lot of other reasons to look at it as well, especially our interest in React. And at the time, we realized that it wasn't, it was possible to build things, but it wasn't possible to build things that we would be super proud of. And in particular, Android was really far behind at the beginning. And has since made great strides. But at that time, the decision was made to like shelve it and let's look at it again in the future type thing. And then it wasn't until late 2018 when it resurfaced. There was an acquisition Shopify did of a company called Ticktail out of Sweden that was building amazing, compelling, beautiful mobile apps on in React Native. And so that caused the resurgence to look at it again. And so I went into detail on this in the blog post. We rebuilt a very popular, highly downloaded iOS app called Arrive, which is our package tracking app. It was already built in iOS. We made the decision to rewrite it in React Native. Now, there's lots of things that can be said about a rewrite. Even if we rewrote it in iOS, we would have built it faster, better, cheaper, because we learned a lot of things. But in rebuilding on React Native, we learned that there were a lot of advances that had happened since 2015. We could use the expertise of some of the folks from the Ticktail team when we ran into hiccups. And we were able to rebuild and deploy this app fairly quickly. And of course, on iOS and Android. And many of the mobile engineering team that were native engineers felt like they were more productive and were enjoying their work more than they were in the native world. So there was a lot of momentum after deploying that in 2019.
So that's a lot to unpack, actually. And it's great that you guys have moved, into React Native and everything. It really sounds like the Ticktail thing was super influential in, bringing Shopify back to reevaluating that. Can you kind of dive into that a little more and talk about, what about that app coming onto the scene for Shopify gave you guys, like what was super impressive about it that it actually convinced other people within Shopify that this was worth pursuing?
Yeah, I think, one thing that's interesting at Shopify in general is we really do look for the smartest people from outside to come in, and we want to value their opinions, right? We don't want to bring people in and say, oh, well, this is the Shopify way, and so come in and do things the Shopify way. We really do look at it and say, hey, what can we learn from these folks who are coming from a different experience, from a different background, from different viewpoints? And so one thing that I've realized that many people don't know is that in the earlier days of these cross-platform toolkits, people would always say, well, show me a top 5 app that's built using React Native. Like that was always the thing that I heard, or whatever cross-platform tool you would look at. And sometimes people would show you an app and you're like, wow, I can't believe it's so, it's got fluid animation, it loads quickly, it's performant, the UI is flexible, and the engineering team enjoys building on it, right? Meaning that it's not a big pile of spaghetti code. And so that's what happened with Ticktail. It was a very compelling, beautiful app that actually allowed people to look at it and go, wow, that's React Native. And then since then, there's amazing apps in the App Store that are React Native that people may not even know. Like one example was, I think Toby, our CEO, tweeted out about Discord on iOS. He was like, wow, I can't believe this is React Native. It's such a highly popular, downloaded millions of times. I think Discord has 250 million users. And the iOS app is built by 3 engineers and is React Native. Another one with a team I recently spoke to is the NFL. So the NFL, which, during the season, of course, we're in crazy C19 world right now where sports is not on. Right? I guess football's not on right now anyway, but from a season perspective, but it's a fully ground up, rewritten React Native app on iOS and Android. And I'm assuming that during the season, it's a top 10, top 5 app, and has video and is compelling and fluid and performant. And that's another example of people like, I don't believe it, right? They didn't think that. And so the same thing was true. We started noticing that there were great, compelling experiences. Now, don't forget about 2015 when the team said, we don't think we can build an app we would be proud of, right? After seeing Ticktail and then rebuilding Arrive, we were like, wow, we can build amazing, compelling experiences for buyers and merchants using this technology and leverage all of the investment we've done in React at the same time.
How was it convincing some of the native guys or people who were already working on native, on the native side, kind of coming over to React Native? Was it a long process or anything?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of things happening, and this is true not just in mobile world, but even in our backend world, right? So one thing that's interesting about Shopify is we build everything in the backend on Ruby on Rails. So you also have strong opinions on that backend as you would have about React Native. So for the guys and gals who work on our mobile stack, there are definitely mobile engineers who want to build in native, just like there are backend engineers who want to build in Java, for example. And so some of those tried React Native, came over to React Native, and are like, "Wow, this is really compelling, and I'm learning something new. I'm learning about reactive programming, and I want to keep working in mobile, and I want to move this direction." There are folks who are like, "Hey, if I'm going to learn a new stack, why don't I move to backend?" So there's some people who are like, hey, I used to be mobile, now I'm moving to backend. There's some people who are still doing native development at Shopify. We still do native development. Like I mentioned, we're not automatically rewriting everything. So there are definitely folks still doing native development as well. But what this opens up is a new pathway and a way to build things in a very compelling manner. I'll give you actually another cool example that just happened last week. So we do something at Shopify 3 times a year called Hack Days, where we give everyone in the company 3 days to just do whatever you want, with the caveat of you have to ship it at the end of the 3 days. And we had a React front-end engineer, never had done any React Native, paired with a React Native engineer for a couple hours, felt that he was able to translate his React experience into React Native, built a compelling app in 3 days, and we're probably going to ship that thing to the App Store after a few more days of work. But again, kind of from a propaganda perspective, does a talk at our mobile meetup, right, which is all the mobile people at Shopify, and talks about how it was amazing that after a few hours of doing React Native was able to be proficient in building mobile and now shipping an app to the App Store after, there's more days after that, but felt pretty productive. So there are definitely the camp of people who are like, wow, this is new and cool, and I want to move into this new world of React Native. And then there are, of course, those who are like, I really like native development, I want to stay there, and they can continue doing that at Shopify also.
Yeah, I'm sure it was pretty easy to get like some of the web guys that were using React to kind of jump over to React Native, since it's like basically kind of the same.
Yeah, there's a few things to say on that. One is you want to, like, the best teams, I think, are a combination of React folks and mobile folks. So you're getting both sides of the coin, because one thing that's interesting about mobile, and, people listening to this podcast probably already know, is there's definitely a different ethos about building for mobile than it is for the web, right? You don't want to build things, the worst case scenario is you're building something on the web and then the mobile team's like, yep, we're just, building those exact features on mobile because they built it on the web. Like, that's not how mobile works. Mm-hmm. Mobile is a completely different context. So you do want to have people who really understand mobile. And from I think it's really important from a product perspective to think about mobile versus just automatically just rebuilding that stuff. So the React folks, yes, are very excited about being able to deploy to mobile, but the tension is to make sure we're building things that people want on mobile, right? Not just repurposing the same feature set.
And during this time when you guys were kind of like thinking about bringing it over to React Native, did you guys kind of experiment on any other cross-platform things like Flutter or progressive web apps or anything like that?
Yeah, so we had, in the case of, because of the TickTail acquisition and the Arrive team, we did not. We just looked at React Native. However, there was another team, which is also launched a React Native app on iOS and Android now called Start. So they focus on everything to do with like pre-commerce, people who want to get into entrepreneurship. So that team built an app called Compass, and they did do an exhaustive evaluation of Native, Flutter, React Native as part of their analysis. And so in their findings, they also chose React Native for some of the same reasons. A big one, of course, being that we have a lot of React infrastructure at Shopify, mm-hmm. a lot of React engineering at Shopify. I mentioned we not only hire, but also train people on React. So that was a big reason to also allow them to scale up pretty quickly onto this team and build these mobile apps and deploy them to both platforms in a matter of months, which is not usually what we see in native land. Actually, what we see in native land, not just at Shopify, but in most places, is iOS first, then Android, and then everyone complains about how Android is behind iOS. Like that's I've just seen it like over and over again. I think James is nodding. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I read some of your blog earlier, and I was astonished to see that after you rewrote on React Native, you were reporting fewer crashes on iOS than native. Mm-hmm. And it was more performant. You could run it on older hardware. I thought that was incredible. What other things have happened along the lines of that have just surprised you about the way that React Native works?
Yeah, so I think we're going to do a few things to dive deeper into these topics, because they're super interesting, and you're not the first person to talk to me and go, wow, how is that possible if React Native is using the same infrastructure that the native engineers use? How is it possible that you could have less crashes, for example? So we're doing a deep dive into this now, because it's hotly contested internally about, like, you have the native engineers are like, how is this possible? And then the React Native engineers are like, I'm not sure how it's possible, but it's happening, right? Meaning, like, we had an iOS app before, and now we have a React Native app, and we're seeing a better crash rate in the new app. So we're doing a deep dive into that. And there's some hypotheses, right? One is that React Native has these rails around the native components such that you can't use them in a way that would cause it to crash. So there's some hypotheses around that. There's hypotheses around that originally maybe we were using the native components incorrectly, and so that's why they were crashing. So we're going to do a deep dive into that and hopefully publish a blog post, because either way, right, whether the blog post is wrong and it's not the case, like we'd like to know like what the reasons are. So I think we're going to do a deep dive. On the performance side, similar. Right? I don't think we were saying that it's faster. I think what we're saying is you can build highly performant apps in React Native now, And it was not the case that this was an obvious thing before. And, for example, we saw that Facebook just rewrote Messenger using fully native, right? And actually in their case, right, like using Objective-C, right? So they decided for performance reasons to stick with Objective-C and rewrite their Messenger app using Objective-C versus React Native, even though they, own the React Native project and have lots of engineers who could do that. So that was their trade-off and their choice to do that. Now, again, one thing that's interesting is go and look at Discord iOS, 3 engineers, very highly performant, right? So interesting from that perspective. But I think what's worthwhile is to take each of these claims and do a deeper dive and understand what those trade-offs mean, right? Because there's definitely trade-offs in every approach. The trade-off for native is, hey, we're closer to the metal. We can potentially eke out better performance. And this is also true in React Native world, right? Like we did test and design some native components for places in the application that we think could have a better experience with that performance. That being said, we try as much as possible to stay in JavaScript land, because if you can eke out 95% or in some cases 99% code share, there's a huge, huge, huge advantage to that.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. When you did the rewrite of the app, was there anything that just didn't work that you were expecting to work? Like, how easily did all the native code translate into sort of React Native components?
Yeah. So I think we were originally, so maybe let me answer your question in a different way. I think we originally thought we would have more native components in our React Native app than we ended up with. Meaning, we looked at the Arrive app and some animations and thought, for sure, some of these are going to have to be native because of how we wrote them, because of the complexity around the physics. We thought for sure we're going to have to rewrite this, and we are writing a blog post about this now, so I don't want to give away too much. But we definitely had some animations in Arrive, and for people who have used Arrive, you'll notice there's like animations around like confetti, and really and it really does help the user experience when you have that sort of effect in a mobile app. And so having to think through and saying, well, this is going to obviously be native was how we started the project. As we got further down the path, we realized that we could, using some JavaScript libraries like Reanimated, build these things in React Native, and they would perform not only on iOS great devices, but older iOS devices and then older Android devices. So this is where some of the surprise for us came in, where we were like, wow, some of these things we took for granted, meaning we thought we would have to build them on native, now we can take for granted on React Native and assume you can change your assumptions the other way now. Assume that it's going to perform in JavaScript, assume that it's going to work cross-platform on older devices, and then test it before you decide I'm going to have to write it in native. And so that's why the shared code count was so surprising, right? Like my guess before looking at it was that we were going to get 80% code share, which is a huge number, right? For anybody doing mobile development, 80% is a huge number to aim for. And like, if you get that, you're like, wow, great. We're off to the races. We're going to get a lot of advantages from going React Native. But to get 95 and 99 on the 2 apps that we have launched is insane.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's a whole nother world, right? Like it's literally, it's a whole nother world. And if anybody's doing the analysis with 80% and then we came to them and said, you might get 95%, like that changes the weighting on the calculus around shared code.
Yeah. Is there anything that you guys miss, like while doing the rewrite, like, oh man, we can't do this? Was there anything?
The engineers will say they miss debugging.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny because I actually like debugging in JS.
I know. So there are people like you at Shopify, but a lot of the native engineers do miss the quality of the tooling of native debugging. So
interesting.
Is that more something that the iOS developers say, or something more that the Android developers say?
See, now you're creating factions, Tim.
Right. Yeah.
You're creating factions. Too. Yeah. So you are right. There was an example also. Maybe I'll answer that question and get into an example that you reminded me of. But yes, it is a lot of it. The iOS engineers are used to a high quality of tooling on with Xcode, that they're like, wow, I can't believe this is how you have to do it. And then the Android engineers would be like, what are you talking about? This is how we do things on Android, right? And one example was something around performance. where the iOS team did end up spending quite a bit of time optimizing some, that's probably lists, because there's always lists, right? Like trying to make fast scrolling lists. And it's something you get for free in iOS. Meanwhile, when you go to the Android team, they're like, oh yeah, we're used to optimizing these kinds of things anyway. So this is no different. The amount of time we spend to optimize this is no different. But the iOS folks are like, what world are you living in? This is like totally free in Swift. And so this is that is something that comes up. And debugging, there are people like Ricky who are like, I really love debugging in this new world. It gets better and better. And now, they just released new debugging tools as well. So it gets better and better, but compared to what they get in Xcode, they're not as proficient in debugging as they are in React Native land.
If you're a front-end developer looking for remote work, then I recommend G2I, a React and React Native focused hiring platform that will connect you directly with their clients that need your skill set. What makes G2I a unique hiring experience is that they spend the time marketing you to their clients of your choice. G2I is a team of engineers that technically vets you up front. If you pass their vetting, their clients have agreed to skip their initial interview process, saving you time and energy getting your next gig. They take care of all the hard work for you so you can get focused on development. To join G2I, go to g2i.co and apply.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially just from my personal anecdotal perspective, I kind of came from an Android engineering background, and then I was a web developer for a while. So to me, I was like, I don't really understand what all these new these shiny things that iOS developers had that they've kind of sacrificed along the way of moving to React Native. So it's always super interesting to kind of pick their brains and be like, well, what could be better, with the whole React Native experience.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about the community growing in terms of React Native. Like more and more companies jumping on this will give that feedback, and in some cases take over those parts of the experience and say, you know what, we really like the debugging experience from Xcode. We want to bring that type of experience to React Native, and they could work with Facebook or take over some parts of the tooling and make it better for everybody. So we didn't talk about that too much, but Shopify is a big proponent of community and open source, all the way from web standards to Ruby and Ruby on Rails, where we're core contributors. And so it's very similar to how we want to interact with React Native. We want to be a big player in the community. And that's why we started our efforts with open source in mind.
So switching gears and kind of diving into that a little bit more, what does that mean for Shopify and their relationship with React Native? Like, what ways are you actually looking to contribute? What's top priority? What do you think would be better? Kind of go into that.
Yeah. So there's a few areas. One is that we noticed that there are already efforts to open source some components that could use more juice. And so one example was we connected quickly with Discord on I think it's called Fast List. They're building a new Fast List that they wanted to open source that they had created for their work inside the Discord iOS app. And so we quickly, volunteered to help them get that to the community more quickly.
And is that specifically because of what you were mentioning earlier too, where like iOS developers were saying that certain lists weren't moving fast enough and stuff?
Exactly. And that's exactly the type of, so if you read that blog post from Discord about how we made our fast list, like how we made our lists faster on iOS, that's exactly the type of article that an iOS engineer would look at and go, I don't understand. Like, this is free. Gotcha. In iOS. And then Android engineers are like, oh, this makes sense because this is the same kind of optimization path we would have to go through for Android. So that's one example. And so there's an example of one. In the blog post, I outlined that we're working with William Candelin. He's the core contributor to React Native and Reanimated. And so we're working with him on some internal work and also open source work that eventually will make that library better. We partnered with Software Mansion. They're the folks with Christoph, who is it Christoph? Maybe I'm messing up his name. Who was the co-creator of React Native for Android. And so we're helping sponsor their open source efforts. We're actually just working with them to help them accelerate their open source work so they can continue having engineers on the open source efforts and pushing that back into the community, working with them. Chatting with Facebook often to figure out if there are community modules that Shopify actually, like, we have a vested interest in making better, and we could work with them on, like, they have an entire project called Lean Core, right? Where they want to move things out of core. And so we're chatting with them about what modules might make sense for Shopify to own long-term. We're chatting with Microsoft on their tooling efforts around React Native. So there's lots going on in the community perspective. And like I mentioned, we don't want to come in, make a big splash, like the blog post, and then like not do anything. So we started off in the blog post having already started these things, right? We were already working with Software Mention. We were already working with William Candelin, already talking to Facebook, already talking to Microsoft, and then accelerating those over this year to make sure that we do what we said we're going to do.
Well, it's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, but
yeah,
it sounds like a lot, but and it's not a little, but that's how community efforts have to happen, right? You can't just pick like one thing. Like I think we're big enough in this space that I think we're able to, like, I can put full-time engineers on this stuff, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, our team, like, we're so busy, but we're kind of a small team of 5, and so it's like it's interesting to hear like all the things that you guys are contributing towards the community, and it sounds super interesting. I wish in the future that's something that I would like to do.
Yeah, I don't want to overstate. Like, I don't want to I talked about a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of people working on these things, but I don't think we've made the impact that we said we're going to make yet. So, stay tuned, but I do hope to do everything that we said we're going to do.
Oh yeah, it sounds cool.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And it's just great to have, this growing interest in React Native and to see, like actual concentrated efforts into giving back to open source and really lifting other developers and lifting this entire, everything about it just up to make it a better, more usable tool set for everyone.
Yeah. And one thing that I was hoping for the blog post to do, which it sort of did, is there's people using this that don't talk about it at all. Right? They're like, hey, you know what? I get in their minds, I get cross-platform almost for free. At least I get to learn once, write anywhere aspects of React and React Native, but they don't have the inclination or reason to like blog about it, talk about it, tweet about it. And so some of these people are coming out of the woodwork, right? Who are like, oh, by the way, like, yeah, we've been doing this for many years. And I'm glad to see other people have figured out the secret that we figured out. Or, people at Facebook saying, thanks for like at least highlighting that this is a real thing that people are doing, and that it's not just about one way to build things. And there are reasons why, for sure, that you still want to build native, but there are also many reasons on why you want to use React Native.
Can we talk a little bit about the cross-platform success of the Shopify apps? So that's the killer feature. I think that's why everybody comes in this one thing. How much work was it to get your iOS app to work nicely on Android as well once you'd written it in React Native?
James, you're asking the killer question.
That's it. I mean, that's what we all want to know. That's what we're here for.
You're asking the killer question. And so I think the reason it's the killer question is because I don't think we talk about it enough. And even when we were doing our build out, I don't think we thought about it enough. And then I want to say one thing before I get into the answer. There are some companies who do use React Native for a single platform. And I think I obviously mentioned Discord already. They're one, right? They use React Native on iOS only, which is quite interesting. When we built Arrive was only iOS. And so one of the reasons we did choose React Native, not just to learn, but also eventually was to deploy it on Android. And it is on Android today as well. But when we first built Arrive, we focused on just iOS. And knowing what I know now and what the Compass team did, the Start team who built their app in React Native did, was they focused on building it with both targets in mind from the beginning. So for anybody listening to this, my advice is to start your React Native project thinking about building to both targets from the beginning. And it is a little more painful because you've got to, deploy to both things and make sure it works on both things. But it will save you a lot of pain later on. And some of the pain is not React Native related. I think I read a blog post about a company that was building something to do with like a cross-platform mobile app. And just the notification system they chose randomly only allowed them, I think maybe they probably just built directly to Apple's like APNS and didn't really think about, oh yeah, we're going to later on go to Android. And so that just caused them pain. And they had many examples of libraries they integrated with that just didn't have Android equivalents, right? Whether it was to do with crash reporting or whether it had to do with analytics. And so when they were doing the Android port, it ends up taking like 2 or 3 months because they've just got all these little pieces. And we saw some of that at Shopify when we were building Arrive. When we first built it, and it's not, I wouldn't say like an overall negative for the project. It was just something that because we deployed on iOS, we were focused on rebuilding it. We then launched an iOS. There was an effort, like an Android port effort, which sounds weird when you're talking about React Native, but there is an effort to then go, okay, how do we make this now deploy on Android? So my advice for folks is to try to go as cross-platform from the beginning as possible. Now, with teams that started that way, there was initial pain, but they're able to release both versions within a week of each other because they're basically there. Yeah, basically they're on both. Now, that is my advice. But of course, like for instance, we did our Hack Days project. We weren't looking at like doing cross-platform. We're like, we got 3 days. We're just going to build on iOS.
How did the teams manage that? Because that is a really interesting way of looking at it. Did you have iOS and Android guys working physically next to each other, sharing the same code base? Did everybody have 2 simulators, one for each device up at the same time? How did you sort of manage that from a working perspective?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is the way Shopify is set up right now. Everybody's working remote, but usually we're in pods, right? So the team is in Shopify pods where the teams are co-located, so they're working close together. And I'd have to, you're asking me a question. I don't know the exact answer. My guess would be they were continually deploying to both simulators and both sets of hardware to test. That's my guess. Because now the other interesting thing about the makeup of the teams is that when we were building all of our different mobile apps at Shopify, especially the ones in React Native, we've been lucky in that the teams have been staffed with a combination of React folks and mobile folks. And those mobile folks sometimes come from the native iOS world and sometimes come from the native Android world. So because of that like heterogeneous grouping of folks, you're likely able to get somebody who's done native development on either iOS or Android in your React Native team, which really helps with the tooling and infrastructure. Now, the other thing that we're lucky to have is we have a team that's under our developer acceleration team, because Shopify is a pretty large R&D organization, right? Over 1,500 people are just in R&D. So we've got people who are focused solely on making your development experience better. And that includes mobile foundations and mobile tooling. So these folks help you get your build environment set up quickly and ready to go. So you can, just type in a few commands on your MacBook and get an environment set up quickly. We've got a foundations team that will help you building core components and give you access to like how we do push notifications at Shopify, how we do analytics at Shopify, how do we deploy all those things set up such that you've got a common core set of things to start from. So for example, I'll go back to that Hack Days example. We were able to pull from existing foundations, tooling, and internal projects, like lots of code, to then get this app going quickly. Like, one example is just authentication. We don't want to have to build that every time for every app. So we have those components ready to go.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's sort of paying up front, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's paying it up front, yeah. And what we do also is we have these secondments where people can take 6 months from their product team to then work on a tooling or foundations team, right? Because they've got the latest context on what we had to build for merchants or buyers or whatever audience. And then they can come back, make the foundations better based on that experience, and then come back to their product team. And then we can continue rotating those people through. So you get a view of like infrastructure. How do I build this to make everybody faster? And then I can do a spike down a certain product vertical as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find this topic super interesting because I think, maybe in the vast majority of cases, a typical React Native developer has to understand the tooling, has to understand a lot of these foundations things, how they're going to implement their SDKs, how they're going to authenticate. And it's probably just local to their own project that they work on or whatever. So it's crazy to me in the best way possible that you guys have been able to segment this out into specific teams, which can just have this expertise and get these other teams up and running so well. It's super cool. And I guess it makes me start to wonder, so you have the tooling team, the foundations team, and then you have these individual React Native teams. Can you talk numbers about how many people are on each of these teams and just how often are they actually interacting with each other?
Yeah. So the teams are not as big as you would think, right? Like the the foundations team. So we're building up our React Native foundations and tooling teams now, right? So these will be no more than 2 to 4 people each, right? They're not gigantic teams. And don't forget, they're seconded from some of the product teams. So people come on for 3 or 6 months and then go back to their product teams. And so there's an allotment there for time to like ramp up on infrastructure, then move into product, ramp up on that. And so kind of go back and forth. In terms of interaction, so we obviously use Slack to communicate. We have different team groups set up in Slack. There's one like Uber group at a Shopify called like Mobile, where all the mobile people interact. There's obviously React Native groups where we share things like around React Native. But we also have like common infrastructure, like I mentioned, like authentication and how we build and a way to deploy apps. So like you can go to, for instance, even on your development environment, you can quickly spin up any of the mobile applications, including React Native applications, fairly quickly because of our tooling. You could also install on your phone, like, via go to a URL from your phone at Shopify and like see all the mobile apps and just install them all. So that's a quick and easy way to get the latest builds and play with them and give feedback.
Yeah,
so,
one thing you actually mentioned too was this whole QR code thing in your engineering blog.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit too?
Yeah, sure.
That sounded interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And it's something that we enabled for the Arrive app first. And the idea behind it was you want to quickly test a PR on your phone, right? There are many reasons why the simulator isn't going to be as close to the real experience as possible, especially with, touch events and seeing how it performs in the hardware. So we developed a quick and easy way to just, once you have the app on your phone, you can quickly scan the QR code. It replaces the JavaScript bundle on your phone with the one from GitHub. And now you're running the latest code, and you can quickly tell if, you're testing a performance issue or a new feature. And you can quickly go back and forth between different PRs, just scanning the QR code. And so we've enabled other teams have adopted that who are using React Native at Shopify, so they can quickly test on the hardware. And so it does require you to have the initial build on your phone, but after that you can quickly replace the JavaScript bundle ad hoc as much as you want.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty. I wonder if we should probably write more about it and maybe make it easier for other people to do that too.
Yeah, definitely. Like that is the key to enterprise development, I think, with this sort of thing. Is just you've got to have these tools to make it work in your team. It's cool when it's just like a developer or a couple of devs doing a project, but at this kind of level, you've got to come up with these solutions to really make it viable, I think. But I guess that's why it's worked so well for Shopify. Yeah,
and I think actually now you're bringing me to realize something that the React Native engineers now look at the iOS engineers and go, what do you mean you have to do that? Like, you're right about the quick turnaround, right? Like, when you have a React engineer or even a React Native engineer, and then looking at the native tooling. So one of the things that they are surprised by in the native tooling is having to restart the simulator or reload all their code. And they're like, you have to do what every time you make a change? So they're surprised on the other side because they're used to this quick iterative feedback loop of React and the web of just literally deploy and just go back to the browser and it's already updated, right? So this mobile world of like hot reloading is a game changer for them because it's literally like, wow, I can't believe I can just like literally type keys here and see it updated here. Like it's a whole nother world for them. So we wanted to, we made it even faster, of course, with this PR adoption, which allows you to, test anybody's PR quickly before even, you can do a PR review and then, ship it to and publish it to master.
Right. That's super awesome. Especially, I just couldn't get over how cool the QR code thing is just because, in my role, sometimes we'll have, people from different departments coming in, asking, hey, can I see the latest build and everything? And, if you don't have a process to do that quickly, it does suck up some time from a developer who could be writing code. So the fact that you guys have made that so snappy is super impressive. And you mentioned maybe making that available to other people. So charge full steam ahead on that, please, because that sounds great.
Yeah, it's a pretty obvious one that has a lot of value, and I think wouldn't be that much work for us to do.
So shifting gears a little bit, Shopify has gone on this long journey, where they've explored React Native initially, and now you've adopted React Native. Now you're going to be contributing to React Native. What other things is Shopify looking at now for the future? Obviously, you've talked about contributing stuff, but are you looking at more experimental things, such as maybe like React Native Web or what else?
Yeah. So you're I think I mentioned in the blog post, we are doing a React Native web experiment. And so the idea behind that, of course, is the same team that's building the mobile experiences, the same expertise, right? Learn once, right, run everywhere. We want to see if that's also possible on React Native web. So we don't have anything deployed yet, but it is an area we're actively looking at. And I would love to see something deployed with React Native web this year. So that we will have experience on that. So, here's something to remember as part of the blog post was that we rewrote Arrive in React Native. We deployed it to production. We wrote the Compass apps in Android and iOS, and also Android and iOS for Arrive. We deployed them to production, and using the data from the deployed app is how we made the decision, right? So for people making these kinds of decisions, it wasn't that we did a master's thesis research project that was just academic, right? We wrote the apps, we deployed them to production, and then made the call. So that's the first thing I want to say. And that's why when I talk about React Native web, obviously you can do lots of research, but until we deploy something in React Native web, it won't be something that we can make a call on whether it would grow more widely at Shopify until we do that. But by deploying the React Native apps, the mobile apps in iOS and Android, we were able to feel comfortable to then say, hey, this is the future of how we're going to want to build mobile apps at Shopify. So, that's how I encourage people to look at new technology decisions, is get something into production before you make a whole big strategy change. In terms of other experiments, so React Native web is a big one. Other experiments are, we want to look at some of the apps that have deep performance implications. So for example, I mentioned this in the blog post. We have a POS, a point of sale application coming out. We announced it last year in 2019, and we're fortunate enough to be able to experiment with React Native in the following way. We have an iOS app coming out, and then for Android, we're going to release the React Native app. And what's interesting about point of sale, and you can imagine this from, remember way back in the day, you used to walk outside and go to a retail shop, right? Before C19, You would see these people who are really adept at using their point of sale, and with one hand they could type and look at you, at the customer, at the same time, because they were just had muscle memory around their point of sale application. So there are very high performance constraints around a point of sale application because people have muscle memory. They literally know exactly where the buttons are going to appear before they appear on the screen. They hit the screen with that, knowing that it's going to appear there. So they expect, in our research, twice as fast of the performance in their mobile POS application as they would a regular mobile app. So that's a great experiment for us. We definitely want to see how a React Native version of our point of sale will do in the wild. Does the performance of React Native hold up to that speed? Do we have to write that one screen natively to get the performance we need? What about interruptible animations? What about buttons appearing where the person thinks they're going to appear and hitting those before the touch area is available? There's going to be all kinds of experiments we want to do in that realm, specifically around performance.
That's cool. And I know that, the high speed of deploying with React Native is going to really help out, since you can, write fast and deploy fast with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we, of course, we've been in development for a while. So we're very encouraged by what we're seeing, but until we get it in front of merchants.
Yeah.
Right. That's how you know.
True test, right?
It's a true test. You got. There's no other test, right? You got to get it in front of real users.
For sure.
Coming soon.
Are you stuck at home climbing the walls when you should be hanging out with the community at the latest conference to get canceled? Are you wondering where to hear your JavaScript heroes like Amy Knight and Douglas Crockford and Chris Heilman? After the cancellations, I decided to put on a JavaScript conference for you, online. I invited my favorite folks from around the web and got them to come speak at an online event just for you. Go to jsremoteconf.com and check out our speakers and schedule. The conference is on May 14th and 15th. The call for proposals is open until March 31st. Come join us at an online conference that we guarantee will keep you safe and keep you informed. jsremoteconf.com.
On the topic of the future of Shopify, is you also mentioned that you guys are actually hiring. So you definitely sounds like you have all these awesome things going on. If you want to kind of talk about what kind of React Native developer or just developer in general that you're looking to add to making all these efforts happen.
Really good point. So Shopify is always hiring sharp folks from all kinds of disciplines. We have a great talent process whereby we look for interesting folks with diverse backgrounds. And so like the exact experience isn't necessarily needed. We're just looking for sharp folks who are interested in learning. And of course, domain expertise is useful, but it's not the only thing. And so we're looking for all sorts of folks around these efforts: React folks, React Native, mobile engineers, native engineers, like within the mind share that React Native is our platform of choice, but that doesn't mean we won't have to build native components and foundations, and there's still native elements. There's all kinds of things going on. The other thing I would say outside of the general call for smart engineers is that I'm specifically hiring a principal engineer for mobile. And so what that means is because mobile is disparate and across the company at Shopify, right? There's lots of different teams. It's kind of like when in the old days, you would be like, oh, well, we'd have like a mobile team that just built the mobile things for everybody. Mobile's everywhere now, right? So every team that builds something has to always think about what happens when my merchant is not at their desk or my buyer. And, we even published it, I think in the blog post, that like 70% of purchases are done through mobile at Shopify. So I'm bringing on a principal mobile engineer to help me steward mobile engineering across the company. And so this is a, director level position of somebody who will help us, really tease out the core common components, make mobile easier, reduce the friction, leverage, each other's code across the company. And so that's something that's reporting to me. And that's, I think, posted on our, shopify.com/careers page as well.
Yeah. Cause I know like mobile, especially with like, e-commerce and everything, it's like a certain UX to it that you have to have. And I'm sure the complexity of that so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about the complexity of like, in our case, right? 1 million shops. We have, Shopify Pay, right? Which is our accelerated checkout. We have people buying across the world in different countries. There's shipping, taxes, performance. There's all kinds of things going on. UX.
Do you guys do any A and B testing with React Native?
Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't limit it to just React Native, right? We do A/B testing across the company. And we also do like graduated rollout of things. And so we are able to test things in production so that we can quickly roll back if something is not going according to plan. And the same is true for like full experiments. So we do lots of experiments. We have an experimental framework that allows us to try things out to a smaller population, to some merchants. We have lots of feature flags that allow us to like deploy code and turn them on when it makes sense. So all of that is happening in the mobile ecosystem as well as in React Native and the web.
Interesting. How do you guys handle like when I think of A/B testing, I think of like I've never done it before, so I'm not really 100% sure about how it works. But is it something that you just deploy in certain regions, like different like bundles? Like California will get this certain build, and Texas will get a different one. Is that how it works, or is it something that's?
So usually, and there's lots of different ways to do it, but usually what you want to have actually is that everybody has the same code, but different folks go through different code paths.
Okay.
So everyone's got the same code, but it's more like because you're in Chile, you're going to get this code path versus you're in the US, you're going to get that code path. Or because you're this type of, in our case, this type of merchant, or you happen to be in our randomized 1% of users, you're going to get this. But everybody, the easiest way to do it is for everybody to have the same code because you don't want to have different different instruction set for everybody because that makes it harder to debug. You really want to have like everybody's got the same code, but because of this attribute, you're now running through this code path. And because of that attribute, that person's running through that code path. And then there's lots of different ways to do it. You could have like 1%, 99%, 10%. It could be location based. There's lots of different ways to do it. But it does, which is where you're probably leading to, help you learn something, right? Which is why you want to do experiments. You want to be able to roll things out. And in the React Native world, there are ways to change the experience more deeply than you could a native app because of the way React Native is architected, which you can take advantage of as well.
And how do you guys debug in production? Like, how do you guys get y'all's logs or anything like that?
Yeah, so it depends on the mobile app. There's different ways. So for example, when we're debugging something on a mobile app, we've got a pretty robust logging infrastructure, which allows us to either server side or from the mobile app, have the logs be sent to us so then we can debug.
Oh, okay.
There's all sorts of analytics that go on in the back end because we want to be able, in many cases, to know when problems are occurring before our merchants or buyers know when they're occurring. And so we've got entire teams that are focused on the DevOps side of this. But we've built our own infrastructure to handle these kinds of things versus using one of the cloud SaaS analytics providers.
Awesome.
So we're kind of getting toward the end of React Native question time. So if you guys have any other questions you want to jump in real quick with, go for it real quick. James, if you had anything still.
Well, I wanted to ask, I'm trying not to create an echo chamber because I love React Native and our listeners listen because I presume they love it. But is there anything you found where you're like, we can't do this in React Native. This just isn't going to work. We've got to keep it native for this particular use case. I know you talked about some of the things with performance earlier, but is there anything that you found already, or are you still waiting for the experiments to come back?
Yeah, so I would say a few things. Definitely there are areas, and we really care about UX. Like Shopify really cares about the design, how things work. I don't like these word design, but really UX, because design it sounds too narrow. It's it's everything. Mm-hmm. It's how things feel, how the design, how it works, and of course also how it looks, but not only how it looks. And there are some areas where we were like, hey, can we do this in JavaScript, or do we have to write a native component? And when you mentioned do we have to wait for the experiments to come back, we actually purposefully built a native component in our React Native app that we thought might have a performance implication, only to understand how these things are connected up and how to maintain this code over time. We wanted to make sure we understood that entire round trip. How do we go from, how do we build a native module? How do we call it? How do we maintain that code? How do we keep the source tree separately? We want to understand that whole ecosystem in case we had to go that route. Also, we hadn't done React Native fully since 2015, so we wanted to understand how that ecosystem has changed. So, but I kind of forced the team to do it versus we ran into a problem. So I want to get merchant feedback before I make that call on performance. On the other side, in evaluating very old hardware, we did notice that for sure, because of the low thread count of React Native, right? You don't have as many threads as you get in native. There are some types of hardware where if you were a new company starting something and building, maybe going out and doing some custom Android stuff, you might make a different trade-off. So for example, if you're trying to figure out how to deploy a low cost, some sort of IoT device or some device that's going to run React Native, and you have to pick between low CPU, multiple cores, and high CPU, low number of cores, because of your decision to go React Native, you're probably wanting to go high CPU, low cores, because React Native has less threads and CPU speed matters a lot. Versus in native, you may be able to make the trade-off and say, actually, we can go cheaper by getting slower CPUs and maybe save on battery life, depending on the type of design, lower CPU clock cycle, and higher cores, because we can take advantage of those cores. So there's some trade-offs like that. And we haven't come across those, but all I'm going through is a thought exercise where how would I have to land in native? Well, potentially, if I have multiple cores, low CPU speed. If I tried to do things in JavaScript and was unable to get the performance I really liked and I had to go down native, maybe it's the makeup of your team is not interested in going React Native. There's a bunch of areas in which case you're like, okay, I have to go native. But for us, we haven't run into those roadblocks yet.
That's awesome news. I'm really pleased to hear it.
But it's good to have that kind of framework. I think everybody should look at their situation, right, and figure out their framework. I'm sure there are people who look at our ecosystem as well and are like, wow, can you really do that in Ruby, right, on the back end? Right? So it's a very similar calculus.
Great. Before we move on to our sick picks, Farhan, is there any other topics that you'd like to touch on or bring up, maybe something that's surprised you just before we close out the React Native portion of the show?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the long-term shared code base, the long-term numbers, because I was surprised by seeing 95 and 99, to be honest. Even as the person who I look over mobile across Shopify, I was expecting 80 when I asked the folks, and then they came back saying 95 and 99. I'm like, wow, that's surprising. So I'm interested in seeing the long term. I'm interested in seeing the analysis we do on crash rates across native and React Native, and sharing that with the community around what we learned, even if it's a a spirited debate, even internally. Like I love to publish even an internal blog post that's like, hey, here's what the native engineers think, and here's what the React Native engineers think, and they don't agree, right? Like I'm cool to do that too. I'm cool to learn more about performance, like I mentioned, in front of merchants and in front of buyers, and when we have to go native. Like that would be a great like blog post as well. It's like, hey, we made this decision. It's a year later. Here are all the experience. Here's all the examples of when we had to drop into native land. And I think that's just, I want to share that because like I learned by writing. And I think just like, here's a good example. I think last week I had a problem with my Wi-Fi network and I rebuilt like the entire thing and I wrote a doc about it because everybody else can learn. So same idea here. I want to just write so that everybody else can learn and we can make everything better. Maybe we make native development better too.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, documentation and just documenting things, even in your personal life and stuff, is just so absolutely underrated. And it's so great to go onto the Shopify engineering blog and, read all about this stuff. And I'm super excited to, see what the engineering blog looks like in a year and see, watch you as you track all these theories or, these things of interest that you're interested in. So I know we'll all be looking forward to that and we'll be keeping an eye on the engineering blog. And in fact, we'll probably put a link in the show notes too, as well, to the engineering blog.
Yeah. And for sure, engineering blog is a great place to go. And I try to tweet out non-random things also. Yeah.
So speaking of tweeting out, where can our users find you?
Sure. So, tend to be, I think, pretty active on Twitter. So it's just, maybe I'll just spell it out at FN. So it's Farhan and then N as in Nancy and then my last name, THAWAR is my Twitter ID. Maybe you put that in the show notes too.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. So moving on now, let's move on to our sick picks. For our new users, this is basically the portion of the show where we just get to talk about some things that we like or maybe have been interested in lately, just something that we want to kind of share with the world. So I'll kick it off and say that my first sick pick is Doom Eternal. I don't know if you're any video game players out there or old school Doom players who play those games, way back when, but they just released a new game called Doom Eternal, and it is super fun. It is like the heavy metal version of a video game. And you are just stomping on and tearing through all these demons. And it is so over the top and you almost want to say obnoxious, but it's done with such like intention and style that it's just great. So I'd say my other sick pick is an article I wrote recently. It's basically just a speed run intro. And this kind of goes back to the topic that we were just discussing, is that you should try to document things and write more because it's so helpful to just get your ideas and thoughts on I would say paper, but in this case, it's a keyboard. So the reason I wrote this quick little blog post, and now I know a lot of our users are experienced React Native developers, so it probably won't apply as much to you, but maybe you could share it with a friend or a React developer who might be interested in transitioning into learning about React Native. And really all it's meant to do is to get your feet wet, to show readers how easy it is to get into React Native, and then at the end to kind of give them the next steps in their journey with React Native. It's like a 7-minute read. So that's me. Let's kick it over to James. What are your sick picks this week?
I've only got one, but it's also a computer game, I'm afraid. The whole internet's either played Doom Eternal or Animal Crossing, I think, since they both came out. But I've been playing Civilization 6, which is, have you guys played that before? It's honestly one of the greatest games / time sinks imaginable. I'm in lockdown over in the UK at the moment, which means that I get up and I do the work I've got to do. And then a few minutes of Civ, and it's literally like 4 a.m. And it's just been the greatest evening ever. It's all I've done this week. I've just been playing that endlessly. I cannot recommend it enough. That's all I got.
Yeah, time sink is an understatement when it comes to Civilization games.
Yeah.
So that's great. Ricky, what's your sick picks this week?
So my sick pick is going to be a book. It's called The Third Door. Have you guys read it before?
No.
No. Okay, so this is about a kid. He's in college, and he basically just want to do the whole medical route. So he's curious to find out like how do you become successful, and so he interviews like people like Larry King, Bill Gates, Pitbull. And before he does all this, the funniest part is that he hacks The Price is Right to get funding to write this book. And it's funny to hear, to read about how he hacked The Price is Right. And then also all the experiences he has interviewing these people about their careers and how they launched their careers. So it's a pretty good read.
Amazing.
Farhan, what are your sick picks this week?
So I've got, you made me think of a third one. So I got three. The first one is House Party, the app. So I don't know if you've played with this. Yeah, it was kind of it like was interesting a year ago, and then like kind of faded, and then with lockdown, basically like almost every night my friends are on House Party. So if you haven't tried House Party, it's basically like low friction Zoom, and it's a social network built on top of video conferencing, and literally has these rooms, and you can have up to 8 people in them, and you'll see when your friends come online, you can jump between rooms. And I just find myself Friday night and Saturday night hanging out with my wife, having a drink, and just like going through different rooms on House Party and talking to friends. So it really feels like you can stay connected. So that's one. Number two is Notion. So when I was writing this little post on my Wi-Fi network, instead of just writing it on my notes app and on my phone, or because I was running around the house fixing things, I only had my phone to write on, or using like Google Docs, I finally said, let me just try Notion because it was already downloaded. And I found it pleasant to write notes on your phone. And I also could easily share it. And now I just use Notion to write notes. So that's my second sick pick. And then third one, you just reminded me, Ricky, about a book I'm reading right now called The Year Without Pants, which is about a manager who joins WordPress. And it's like the first team lead at WordPress. So he talks about WordPress's like remote culture and how they maintain a very strong culture while being remote. And it's just perfectly timed with right now. Because I think somebody tweeted it and said, hey, this book is free right now on Amazon. And so I just, free Kindle download and started reading it. It's actually pretty good.
My favorite part about Notion is being able to put GIFs in your icons.
Oh, I didn't even try that.
Yeah, you can. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, cool. Yeah, but it's a very nice mobile. It reminds me of Quip. I don't know if you played with Quip.
Mm-mm.
But Quip, they got acquired by Salesforce. But 2015, when I started my company, we started using Quip instead of Google Docs. And it is so good on mobile to write. And so Notion reminds me of Quip. It's a very Quip was more like internal documentation, like company docs. And this is more like public. So anyway, try Notion or try Quip if you haven't tried that. It's very good on mobile as well.
Yeah, I saw Ricky smiling immediately when you brought up Notion because he actually got our whole team at Activision Blizzard to switch over to Notion. And it's actually been super easy to use. And yeah, like the little features like being able to do like Ricky said, the GIF, or like, even for certain features, like we have a Call of Duty League document in our Notion, and I was able to upload the little logo for Call of Duty League. And so like just those small little details are something I've never seen in a note-taking app before. So it really is great.
Yeah, what I love about it sounds funny, is I love that you can delete a whole line with an X. Like you delete like bullet points. Like I was rearranging something and I literally said X, 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 and it was deleting entire lines on mobile. And I'm like, oh my God, because usually, you're hitting, people always hold the backspace down to delete lines in mobile, and you got to wait for it to go from character to like deleting words, and then you got to let go in the right time. And this thing just like X, 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 super good.
Yeah, great UX there. All right. So Farhan, you've already mentioned where our users can find you. Ricky and James, where can users find you? Let's do Ricky first.
On Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Romero Ricky IO. So it's ROMERO RICKY IO. I'll put that in the show notes.
Cool. And James?
You can find me on Twitter as well. It's at Stern Job Name, which is an appalling Twitter handle, but also an anagram of my actual name.
Beautiful. And users, you can find me, Tim Jung, on Twitter as well. That's Tim Jung, Jung, DEV, so dev at the end there. So thank you, Farhan, for coming on today and taking the time to talk about everything going on at Shopify. It sounds absolutely awesome. Sounds like a great place to work too, where you guys are just really considering, the experience of the developers and experimenting with all these things. So it's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, and for our listeners too, for tuning in.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.